If you wanted to place a bet on Donald Trump getting impeached or resigning before the end of his first term, you would get 4 to 5 odds from the British betting site Ladbrokes. That means the bookies think it's more likely we'll have a new president by 2020 than not. Now I know what you're thinking. You're thinking this is great, because now that Donald Trump's fat finger isn't on the red button, we won't die from a nuclear apocalypse. But don't get too excited, because the options to succeed Trump are pretty damn awful. So let's run through them. If Trump leaves office, the guy who would take over is Vice President Mike Pence. Pence believes you can convert the gayness out of someone and signed a law in Indiana that forced women who had an abortion to hold a funeral for the fetus. While governor, he oversaw the largest HIV outbreak in Indiana's history by closing down so many Planned Parenthoods that people in rural towns couldn't get tested. He also calls his wife mother and refuses to meet with women in private lest he, be tempted. So yeah, potential future President Mike Pence is a real deal psycho. But the scariest part is that unlike Trump, he looks like a president and would know how to act like one. So he may find it easier to pass all kinds of horrible shit while pretending to be decent and honoring the office or whatever. But let's say he turns down the job to avoid having to sit in a room alone with German Chancellor Angela Merkel. Then, Speaker of the House Paul Ryan becomes president. Paul Ryan is probably the biggest dork in DC, and that's saying something. But the worst part about him is that he's perfectly willing to let poor people die in order to give rich people more money. In fact, shredding the social safety net, which millions of Americans depend on for survival, has been a dream of his since he was a dweeb in college.
We've been dreaming of this since you and I were drinking at a keg.
He's one of the architects behind the Obamacare repeal bill known as the AHCA, which will cause 23 million people to lose their health insurance, which will result in thousands of unneeded deaths. After Paul Ryan comes Orrin Hatch, who's been in the Senate for so long that they gave him the title of President Pro Tempore. And I don't know what that means. You know, Orrin Hatch, the guy who complained about giving people access to health care by saying, once you get them on the dole, they'll take every dime they can. Orrin Hatch, great guy. Fourth in the line of succession is Secretary of State Rex Tillerson. He was literally the CEO of ExxonMobil, which is literally the largest oil company in the world. They knew about global warming since 1981, but still funded climate change denial research anyway. When the Earth becomes uninhabitable due to global warming, a huge chunk of the blame will fall on ExxonMobil's shoulders. So thank you, Rex Tillerson. After him comes Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin. He's a former Goldman Sachs executive worth about $500 million. Would you like to know how he made all that money? Good, because I will tell you. He was one of the guys who bought a bank called IndyMac after the government took it over when it collapsed during the financial crisis. The new ownership group financed over $1 billion in payouts to themselves by kicking 36,000 people out of their homes through foreclosure. One judge called the behavior harsh, repugnant, shocking, and repulsive. Also, no one can pronounce his name, so let's move on. The next in line is Secretary of Defense James Mad Dog Mattis. How did he get the nickname Mad Dog? Oh, because in 2004, Marines under his command shot at ambulances and aid workers, prevented civilians from escaping Fallujah, and posed with pictures of the people they killed. The local soccer stadium had to be turned into a graveyard to bury all the civilians they were killing. He also personally authorized an attack on a wedding party, which the Iraqi government claims killed 42 civilians, including 13 children. But at least he's self-aware about his reputation.
Keeps you awake at night?
Nothing. I keep other people awake at night.
After Mattis comes a man named Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III, our Attorney General. He's the guy who thought that members of the Ku Klux Klan were, quote, okay until I found out they smoked pot. Back in 1986, the Senate Judiciary Committee decided that he was too racist to be a federal judge. Coretta Scott King wrote, quote, Mr. Sessions has used the awesome powers of his office in a shabby attempt to intimidate and frighten elderly black voters. Since then, he became a senator, where he spent his career trying to prevent as many black people from voting as possible, while complaining about the, quote, shrinking prison population, which he wrote about in a post on Medium, which, like, So the point is that while, yes, Trump is bad, just getting him out won't change the fact that we have a whole group of awful Republicans in power. So we should be opposing the whole Republican agenda, not just Trump.